Okay, welcome. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Adams. I am the CEO of Civil Mediation Council. I've been in the role since 2018, so I've seen a lot of changes in that time. The organisation is continuing to grow and develop, and as is the sector. And I think that's one of the key things really, is that the organization is having to adapt to a constantly changing scenario. You'll be aware of the changes that have happened in the sector in the last couple of years. It's a very exciting time to be in mediation within England and Wales. And I think there are undoubtedly challenges going forward, both for the sector and for the organisation, in being able to resource and adapt to those changes as they happen. I do this session probably once a year as a sort of sit rep as to where the organisation has got to. We are about to launch a new strategy, which will be coming out in June. So I'm under strict instructions not to trample too much all over that. So what I'm going to do is give you a kind of snapshot of where we find ourselves now, and a little bit of a taster as to what we want to do in the future, without breaching the proposed strategy, which is just waiting for sign off by the board. It's virtually finished. In fact, we had a board meeting yesterday, and 95% of it has been approved. Just got some tidying around the edges to do before it goes public. Okay, so hopefully I won't be teaching too many people to suck eggs, but the CMC has been around since the early 2000s. Initially a solely volunteer-run organisation, and one of the first to sort of look to professionalise mediation in the UK. We are now a professionally run organisation. We have a secretariat. I think the first thing to say is we are a very small organisation. So I have a team of 5, but actually that only equates to about 3.5 FTE. I think sometimes people think the CMC is we've got hundreds of people and loads of resource, and chance to be a fine thing, but we're not in that position. We're solely funded by membership, and that is something that, go back to what I've already said about challenges around adapting to a constantly moving situation with mediation. Whilst it's very exciting, it's also quite difficult to juggle those competing priorities. So what are we here to do? So fundamentally, we are here to do 2 things. We're here to promote the resolution of conflict through mediation, and we're here to educate both the mediation community, but also the general public into the benefits of mediation and encourage the use of mediation. And those 2 kind of tenets sit in our charitable objects. So if you look us up on Charity Commission, that's what you'll see we are here to do. And we do that in a variety of ways. So predominantly we've got kind of 4 pillars, 4 things that we focus all our work around, and they support those 2 objects that sit with the Charity Commission. And those 4 pillars really are around regulation of mediation and mediators, the consultation, both internally and externally within the sector, and with government, and information and education piece, both to the public but also to our members, and an influence piece in terms of trying to steer the sector and steer government in a direction which promotes use of mediation across the board. And so we spread our resources across those 4 things. What we aren't is a professional body in the sense that you will see, for example, with some trade bodies. So we are not a lobbying organisation. And we are not, technically, we're not here to find work for mediators, and that sometimes causes some confusion about the role of the organization. That said, of course, we want mediation used wherever possible, and therefore indirectly that should bring in more work for our mediators. And you certainly see that with, you know, the work we've done around what is now being termed integrated mediation, was called automatic referral to mediation. That's quite in some areas with some mediators, that's quite a controversial topic, but one of the main aims there really is to increase the amount of mediation and the use of mediation more widely, with an indirect benefit, we hope, in the medium term for our members, in terms of creating more work, particularly in the for claims over 10,000, which is the kind of next phase that the government's looking at. So how do we go about doing that? Well, as I say, we've got these 4 pillars: regulate, consult, inform, and influence. The part of the regulate function is also about educating and provision of CPD, and that's something that we are increasingly looking at in terms of how do we help our members become better mediators. So we've got a range of schemes and initiatives around that we're running at the minute, and we're always looking at ways to try and develop that further. In terms of the consultation, it's very much around both focus groups, working groups that I'll talk about in a minute, but also around events, around surveying our members to understand what their views on particular issues are. Informing the public, that's both in terms of taking on a role from government to educate public. So if you look at the web traffic to our website, about 93 or 94% of that comes from government websites. So we are the first port of referral from government. Government doesn't really provide that much information around mediation. In this day and age, they have done in the past. They now pass inquiries from the public directly to our website. So that gives us the opportunity to educate the public about what's available. And then finally, that influence piece, that's both influencing government, but also influencing the sector. How can we all work together? And for those of you who've been around mediation a reasonable amount of time, certainly historically, it was quite a fragmented sector. And we've worked hard over the last few years to try and pull that together wherever possible. Obviously, there are still several membership organisations within the sector, but we're all working much more closely in this day and age. And that makes it much easier for us to have a bigger impact when it comes to talking to government, etc. So just to talk through each of those kind of pillars, in terms of regulating, which is from a member's perspective, is a lot of what you will see, both the regulation and the education. We set training standards. We're in the process of moving to an independent mediation standards board, so giving one step of separation away from the main board of the organisation. We're looking to bring in more expertise from outside the sector, particularly around training standards, to help us drive up standards and look at innovative ways to improve those standards in ways that are achievable for our members, but also that help to provide a better service for the public. All members sign up to a code of conduct, and again, that's something that we're looking to develop further, especially with the broadening of the specialisms of mediation that we're looking after. We need to make sure that that code of conduct covers all mediators and is fit for purpose. So that's work that's ongoing. For our core members, so those who are associates, registered or fellow mediators, we have both an annual CPD requirement and a mandatory insurance requirement. That's about protecting the public, but again, also driving up standards. And we now have an independent complaints and disciplinary procedure, which is run by a team of experts who only focus on complaints and discipline across other sectors as well. So they're bringing in a lot of expertise from other areas. And whilst that is essential in order to encourage confidence in mediation, both from the public and from the government, I'm pleased to say that that process is run in an educational manner. So we're not about punishing mediators for making mistakes. We're about helping them to learn from those mistakes and ensure that standards continue to go up. We're brutally aware nobody sets out to do a bad job, and therefore, how can we help? So you'll see, for example, at annual conference, excuse me, there is always a session where complaints and disciplinary panel will feed back, what's happened in the last year, how can you learn from it, what are the common mistakes that some mediators fall into. So we're again trying to help to educate the membership across the piece. Excuse me. We also maintain a series of registers. So we have the main register, which is publicly available on the website, and that covers the main areas of mediation. We also have a fixed fee scheme, and in collaboration with the College of Mediators, we also hold the SEND register, which membership of which is essential in order to access work in SEND sphere, particularly that funded by government. We also hold an April Foil and Mass register, which is specifically for those working in the insurance sector, particularly around personal injury. So that's another specialist scheme that we hold. So in terms of regulation, we're very much about ensuring that the rules are fair, that they're clearly understood, and that we are constantly looking to adapt them and move them forward and drive those standards up, whilst at the same time ensuring that we educate people and help people to aspire to improve both in their professional standards and also in their understanding and application of mediation. So that's the first sort of pillar of what we do. Second pillar really is around consultation. And that consultation happens both intra-sector and outside of the sector, but particularly with government. So how are we doing that? Well, we have a government liaison working group whose sole focus is to talk to the MOJ and also to wider government in terms of the implementation of mediation across the piece. I'm sure all of us here would strongly support mediation being integrated within government processes. Certainly my experience, for example, prior to CMC was within the military, and having seen the cluster, which is MOD contracts, anybody with half a brain would want mediation brought into those contracts, because the taxpayer fundamentally loses hand over fist whenever there's a dispute over MOD contracts. So we're very much talking to government, but also trying to listen to you guys as members and the broader sector. We're also listening to and liaising with other membership bodies, so the college, Family Mediation Council, for example, to understand what best practice looks like, to understand what direction we think we should go. For example, family mediation is at a different point in the journey to a lot of what we cover, and the question is, can we learn from that? Are there ways to sort of fast track that process? Do we follow the same model that family mediation has taken? Some aspects of it yes, some aspects of it no. So all the time we're trying to move forward as quickly as possible, whilst at the same time ensuring that we take as many of the participants in the sector with us. You'll have seen over the last couple of years, we've done several joint ventures with, for example, the college. So I mentioned the SEND register, which we hold with them. We've done a joint conference a couple of years ago. We've done national mediation awards, and whilst that might seem sort of normal now, certainly 6 or 7 years ago, there was quite a lot of friction between the different elements of mediation, different mediation organisations, and so we've looked to reduce that friction wherever possible. The members amongst you will have seen a member consultation that that we put out earlier in the year, and those results have now been circulated. So that was very interesting. One of the things that government is constantly asking us for is data. And that is something that historically has always been an issue. Obviously, there's the CEDA audit, but really that CEDA audit has been the only source of objective data. And so we're looking to address that. Partly because it's useful internally, but partly because it's very difficult to argue for a particular course of action with government unless we've got the data to back it up. So there is definitely a business case there. We're also looking at how we listen to our members more holistically, if you like. So, for example, we run a series of networking events, and very often, good ideas come from people sidling up to have a chat. There is one this evening, if anyone's interested, at CEDA. So our spring social is this evening. If you're interested in coming along, drop myself a line, or hopefully one of my colleagues will drop it into the chat. We also run a series of working groups. Now, the working groups are both an ear to what is going on in the sector and what members believe should be happening, and a very effective way of moving us forward on a variety of issues. So what we try and do with our working groups is that we bring together expertise around a particular issue, and then utilize that expertise partly through volunteer effort and partly through the executive applying the kind of professional resource, if you like, to get things done. And that enables us to have a broad portfolio of experience and expertise, much broader than we would have within the board or within the executive. So as an example, we have a commercial working group, and that is something that I think, it sounds odd given the history of the organization, but has been quite a long time coming. I think we sort of just assumed we knew everything about commercial mediation because that was the sort of background to the organization. And in the last couple of years, the commercial working group has definitely enabled us to increase our understanding of this area. Obviously, it's probably the commercial, probably financially the most lucrative, and therefore there are a lot of expertise in that area, and a lot of mediators are interested in it. The question is, how do we spread it more broadly? So we've got some stuff going up in the strategy, looking at how do we convince business that commercial mediation is the way forward. Our penetration in the market is small, and that is something that, go back to my point earlier, it's not our job to find mediators' work, but it is our job to educate the public about mediation, and therefore we need to get across to broader business the commercial benefits of using mediation, and that is something that still is a struggle and shouldn't be, given an increasing body of evidence that we have to demonstrate its effectiveness, both in terms of time and money. So that is definitely something that will feature strongly in the strategy, and is definitely an area that we need to exploit over the next couple of years. Peer mediation, this is something that anyone who's attended the conference will have seen sessions run on peer mediation in the last couple of years. We amalgamated with a peer mediation network about 2.5 years ago, and this is an area where, again, as CMC has broadened its remit, peer mediation is one of the areas that we have taken on for a variety of reasons. One, it's evidently the right thing to do, and it sits very neatly with our charitable objects. But also, looking at the long-term picture, if we're going to change the mindset, change the culture around mediation and its utilization, then we need to start with the next generation down. And it is easier to convince people of the benefits of mediation before they get too indoctrinated in the way things currently work. So there's definitely that side of it. It's also because it enables us to tap into or potentially tap into funding which wouldn't exist, for example, philanthropic funding, which wouldn't necessarily exist when it comes to commercial mediation, for example. So there's definitely that strategic aspect to it as well. So that working group has really developed over the last couple of years and is doing great work. Workplace, much like commercial mediation, it's another vibrant working group. Again, I think I don't need to convince anybody on here about the benefits of workplace mediation. What we need to convince is business owners and CEOs across a variety of business sectors to incorporate workplace mediation more in a more integrated fashion. And that working group is doing really good work, doing some work with ACAS. Again, it's a huge opportunity, but also the challenge really is the amount of resource that we can put behind it, and that is a reoccurring theme for the organisation. How do we generate sufficient resource to be able to pursue these initiatives as fully as we would like to? Another of our specialist working groups now is community working group. So community is something that we've taken on relatively recently, about 18 months ago, and is coming along really well. Many of you will be aware that there's no national body for community mediation, and therefore what we're hoping to provide very much is a kind of point of focus and some national coordination to enable community to get a bit more traction. Again, when it comes to convincing, for example, the Home Office or local authorities of the benefits of community mediation, what we really need is objective data, and that is obviously a struggle. Add to that, obviously, issues with local authorities around devolution, etc. Local authorities never claim to have any cash, but at the minute they're claiming they haven't got any cash whatsoever. But actually, that's exactly why community mediation becomes important, because it's a way of saving money, not spending it. So we are heavily engaged in that sphere, and looking to make progress over the next couple of years. And the final sort of specialist working group that we run, again quite new, is academic. So we pulled together a large number of universities across the country who are either interested in delivering mediation related training or want to utilize mediation internally, be it with their students or be it with their staff, sort of workplace mediation, if you like, in the academic context. And that is coming along really strongly. And the good thing there is that it's a two-way street in terms of, we're helping to advise and provide them with contacts and suggestions around the use of mediation, but conversely, they're also providing educational content which we can feed back into member benefit. We're looking to run an annual, if not 6-monthly, lecture series with some of the academic institutions. So again, that will feed back in terms of benefit to membership. Finally, then, is very much around inform. So what are we doing to inform? So as I've said already, the website, we're looking to refresh the website this year, but it is the primary source of information for the general public, particularly anyone who goes to a government website will be, unless it's family, of course, will be deferred to our website. Social media, same thing. So we are trying within the resources that we've got to put out as much educational content for the general public as possible. But it doesn't stop there in terms of, we're also very keen that we provide CPD for our members, and we're trying to do that in a variety of ways now. Increasing member benefit is probably the #1 priority for the organisation at the moment, and that is around ensuring that we deliver CPD for, we have a variety of experience levels amongst our membership. So we're currently running mediation in session, which is free to the members, which is a regular CPD session. Mandy Lenton is running a mentoring scheme for associates in their first few years, helping them to learn from each other, learn from experience gathered amongst the group rather than just individually. You'll be aware of the conference. So our annual conference is probably our jewel in the crown, if you like, when it comes to providing CPD to membership and non-members. But obviously, if you're a non-member, you've got to pay quite a lot more to come. Last year's conference was an outstanding success. We increased the number of attendees at the conference by 250% over our previous best attendance. And already for this year's conference, which will be happening in the autumn, we've already sold more tickets than we had sold prior to last year at any point, and we're kind of 6 months out. So that's fantastic, and I think that's testament to the hard work put in by the team and the contributions, high quality contributions provided by members and external experts. So that's really encouraging. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that CPD is accessible to the membership, and because of that, the conference currently runs online and actually has run online since COVID. Several members have asked for it to return face-to-face. I think that is unlikely to happen in the short term, at least. And the reason for that is because we need to provide CPD benefit to our members, irrespective of where they live. So, if you're a member in Plymouth or you're a member living in London, you pay the same membership fee, and therefore you should be entitled to the same CPD opportunities. So what we're trying to do is split face-to-face networking opportunities from CPD in its sort of purest form. So for example, the spring social this evening that I mentioned at CEDAW obviously is at St Paul's in London, and it's difficult for us to run. We are looking at it, but it is difficult for us to run networking events outside of London and get good attendance. We're open to suggestions on that one, and there may be something around the conference being run at the same time as the conference being run outside of London. But fundamentally, if we want good attendance face to face, it tends to be London. The issue for that is everyone who doesn't live in London. So how do we juggle that kind of competing priority? So at least for now, the conference will remain online, and that also enables those who are unable to attend to watch the recordings, which again means that we can deliver CPD to the widest percentage of our membership. So in terms of educating, we are doing our best not only to drive up standards, but also to ensure that we keep members informed about what is a fast-changing situation, particularly around the implementation of mediation with government. On that, it's very much within our kind of influence pillar. We are supporting the MOD and government wherever possible. My thanks to the team on the government liaison team, which takes up, are all volunteers and takes up a large amount of time. Unsurprisingly, it can be quite frustrating, sort of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, but things are definitely moving in the right direction. And I think if you had said pre-COVID, would we get here, bearing in mind, COVID wasn't very long ago, and pre-COVID, all mediation was being done face-to-face, all mediation training was being done face-to-face, and there was little appetite from government to integrate mediation in any way, shape or form. Things have changed dramatically over the last few years, and I think sometimes we forget to just look back and see where we've come from. Current situation is far from perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was, and it's definitely going in the right direction. So that, you know, we can take comfort for that. Finally, then, just to talk about before give some time for questions. So just to highlight where we are as an organization. So membership has grown strongly over the last few years. We have just over 1,000 members now, about 1,050 members. Membership is growing at a steady kind of 12% year on year, which is you know, very encouraging. Obviously, we've bought in a couple of years ago, we bought in associate membership for those newly qualified, and we bought in fellows. Both of those membership categories have been a great success. In terms of a breakdown in our membership category, probably 50% of our members are now registered. So we would see that as the sort of industry standard for mediation, professional mediation delivery. Around a third of our membership are associates, and that's really encouraging for the future in terms of bringing in new talent. You know, the skeptics amongst you will be saying there's got to be work for that talent, and we would agree with you 100%. And that goes back to what I was saying about ensuring that mediation becomes part of the culture, and what can we do to influence particularly business, I guess, but also government, to ensure that their mediation really is integrated, and the opportunities for mediation should be enormous, are enormous. We just got to get that message across more clearly. So we're about 50% registered mediators, about a third, around 300, just over 300 are associates. And that is both an opportunity and a challenge for us. We need to ensure that those associates continue to get the professional development they need, and the experience opportunities that they need to develop in order to gain registered status. And around just over 110, I think, now are fellows, and that's great because it shows that we're continuing to recruit senior mediators who perhaps have been outside of CMC for a while. We're also seeing steady migration from associate to registered, and registered to fellow, and again, that's good. That shows, you know, professional development within the membership. Part of the strategy will be looking at how do we make that a bit easier. So, for example, and I'm just, you know, don't quote me on this one, but for example, currently we have a 10-year time served requirement in order to reach fellow. Well, you know, you could do 10 years with 2 mediations a year, or you could do, you know, 50 mediations a year for a couple of years. The question is which is better. So we're looking at that around fellow status. As far as associates, we're looking at, you know, the age-old issue with observations. We're very clear that you know, seeing mediation in practice is super useful, but conversely, you know, no two observations are the same. And so you could have a fantastic observation where you learn loads, or you could have a rubbish observation where you learn nothing. So the question is, how do we bring some objectivity to that? And certainly the work that Mandy's doing around group mentoring of associates is potentially a step in the right direction. It's been very well received. We're oversubscribed 3 times over, I think, for the spaces that we have, and so we're looking at more provision there. You know, that is an opportunity for mediators with some mediations under their belt to come in and learn from each other. You know, you don't have to experience all the highs and lows of mediation in order to learn from the experience of others. And you know, if you've encountered a problem and somebody else has encountered the same problem, but they dealt with it in a different way, there's great learning opportunity there. So we're definitely looking at really improving the professionalism of that career development and CPD for junior mediators. So in conclusion, the future's bright. You know, the organization has grown really well. We continue to face resource issues. There's lots of things that we'd love to do, and I know sometimes people get frustrated that we're not doing even more. If we had the resources to do it, we would. But membership is growing well. Conversations with government are going really well. Many of you will be aware we've applied for chartered status. That application is going well, and we hope to have some news on that in the next few months. So whilst we're not whilst it's not nirvana, we're certainly, you know, heading in the right direction, and the organization is flourishing with the support of yourselves, with the support of new members coming in, and with the support of government. So fundamentally, it's a positive message. That's probably enough talk from me. I don't know if anyone has any questions. So 20 minutes.
Hi, Paul. Thanks very much for that. I'm sure some people will have comments and questions. I see that we've got 57 people on at the moment. That's very, very good, much more than we've had for recent meetings, and is almost a full house, given some people who have all previously expressed that they couldn't make it. Comments and questions, please. Could you put your virtual hand up if you may? But I see Natasha's got her actual hand up, so we'll take Natasha first, please.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that talk. It was really good. Just a bit of background. I have finished my course in December, and I'm currently going through the portfolio. I just wanted to touch on your point about people progressing and more to be done within the industry. If more can maybe be done at ground level, so i.e. the course. I feel like I finished the course, was successful on the course. I had no issues, no amendments, yet I feel like it didn't prepare me well enough. When I'm going through my portfolio and writing up my portfolio and going through the grid, I'm actually learning more from the grid and the requirements of that grid. And when we have to reference, you know, we said X, Y, and Z, and what does that relate to? That relates to C52 or something. I'm learning more through that than I am at the courses. I did go through a regulated school, a regulated course, and an approved course. But I still feel like, other than the 20-minute exam, it didn't really prepare me for any of the requirements of the portfolio. And in terms of the portfolio, I think that's quite bad. I'm learning more from the portfolio than I am my course.
Okay. A couple of things sort of on the area you're talking about. So one of the things we've done over the last couple of years is brought in independent moderation of the courses, because you know, feedback was that there was a variety of standards out there, and actually what we had done historically was we had accredited the course content and not the outcome. So, you know, we'd said, okay, the course ticks all the boxes, great, but we hadn't taken the next step and said, well, actually, train people however you like, as long as the output is above the kind of minimum quality. So that is something that we've done over the last couple of years to ensure that we get more consistency, and I'm sure that more that can be done. There are some fantastic courses out there. In terms of what you're talking about, sort of post-course, that is very much where the work of Mandy Lenton and others is sort of focused. You know, how do we help? You know, because the trouble with the courses is that you're getting a wide variety of experience coming into the courses. So some individuals will come in with, you know, who've perhaps been working in dispute resolution for a long time. You know, may come from a legal background or whatever, but they will have a lot of the sort of life experience, if you like, of being in a room with people who can't get on, etc., etc. And so actually what they need is perhaps very different from somebody who comes in with none of that experience. So you're always, the course is about getting you to a certain point. I think your point is, how do we help you develop going forward? And that's very much about how do we get newly qualified mediators or mediators in their first couple of years together to learn from each other. And I'll just give you an example. Nothing to do with mediation. So when I was in the military, one of the most valuable courses that I ever did in terms of leadership was what they call captain's course, which is where you get the equivalent of an associated mediator, but in the military. So somebody who's got a couple of years of experience, and you get a bunch of you together and you go through some problems and share some experiences and tell some war stories about the issues that you faced and how you dealt with them. And that, you know, when you've got two of you, you double the number of the amount of experience you've got and the perspectives you've got. When you've got 20 of you, suddenly, you know, you increase that exponentially. And for me, that's where I think, you know, the work of Mandy Lenton and others, this is where we need to focus. You need to be able to go out and get some experience so that you understand what you don't know, if you understand where I'm going from. And then we need to pull that together with an experienced mediator or experienced facilitating team to say, okay, you know, well, how could you have handled that differently? Or, you know, this situation here that John or Jane had, you know, how would we have handled that? Well, actually, I would have done it this way. Well, yeah, we tried that, it didn't work. Okay, so how else could we do it? So I think one of the things that we've been guilty of in the past is to say, okay, you've done the course, you know, great, where you go. So you're a fully qualified mediator. Well, you know, we're all on a I hate this expression, but we're all on a journey. And as you get more experience and you have the opportunity to learn from others, then you start to mature your professional ability. And I think it's exactly that kind of phase in your career that we need to do more with, and that's what we are looking at now.
Can I just interrupt a second, Paul? Natasha, a couple of people have asked what kind of course you're talking about, without necessarily stating who the course was with. Was it a conventional 5-day mediation accreditation course with the last 2 days being assessed, or something different?
Yeah, it was. But I'm actually doing family and civil and commercial. So I've been both courses. So I'm more specifically talking about family.
I thought you might be, yes.
Yeah, but I potentially anticipate the same problems when I'm doing the portfolio for civil and commercial, but I know that the requirements are a lot different. So it'll probably be a lot easier. But yeah, it was more general across the board.
I think to that point, you know, as I said earlier about looking at the models that are out there and trying to navigate the best way through for our members. You know, the portfolio system that family utilizes, you know, some people are a massive fan of, some people aren't, and you know, we've made a decision, or at least for now, we've avoided that route, for better or worse. I think the question is, if we avoid that route, how do we fill the gap? How do we ensure that there is support in that period post qualification? And that sounds like where you are now. So I think any ideas people have got on it, we're all ears, but we are very alive to the issue. And one of the, with my non-mediator skeptics hat on, you know, it's crucial for us commercially, because we now got 1/3 of our mediators who are associates. So if we don't look after associates and help them develop, they're going to move out of the sector, and that's going to affect us commercially. So there's both the sort of philanthropic professional mediator motivation, but there's also a commercial motivation in that we need to make sure that these individuals stay in the sector that they find work, and that they are able to operate professionally and effectively.
Thanks, Paul. Natasha, do you want to say anything else before we move on to somebody else?
No, thanks everyone. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you, though.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Second on my screen is David Watkinson, although he was first on my screen earlier on. David, if I remember correctly, you're from the infamous Garden Court Chambers.
Thank you very much, Dave. Yes, I am from that cell of left-wing activists featured in The Spectator week before last.
And the Daily Mail.
Thank you for reminding me. We are intending to write thanking both organs for the free publicity that they gave us and for the upsurge in inquiries for our services since. So to my question, Paul, I am a member of the CMC. It's good to see you in person, albeit online. I wanted to ask if you had a view about the small claims mediation system, which as of sometime last year, it's been required all those who issue a small claim to be referred to what is called mediation. Small claims, probably everybody knows, small claims are claims which are for £10,000 or less. And for a good many people, I think £10,000 would be quite a considerable amount of money. But the mediation they're referred to is not mediation as I expect most of us know it. It's a 1 hour appointment with someone who I'm not sure is a qualified mediator, who shuttles between the claimant and defendant in an effort to get a settlement within that period of time. So my sub-question is, does this indicate that government announces it's interested in mediation, but it's really only interested if it's mediation on the cheap?
Right, okay. Look, congratulations on your newfound infamy, by the way. Small claims mediation. Here's the rub, okay? It isn't commercially viable to run that system utilizing mediation as we would describe it at a level that mediators would get paid sufficiently well to facilitate it. I completely understand that, you know, a lot of mediators get hot under the collar about this because it isn't mediation as we would recognize it. For me, the issue is a bit moot because actually nobody wants to do that work at the level of funding that could be provided. And for me, it's a foot in the door in order to open access to claims over 10,000, which will pay well enough for mediation to be used in its more sort of conventional form. So for me, it's a strategic issue, and it was absolutely the right thing to do to support the government to go down this route, because it will open the door to wider use of mediation at a level that will support our members. The feedback that we've had is that it's somewhere between 40 and 50% effective. So actually, even at 40%, there's a lot of people that don't have to get their situation resolved quicker and cheaper. So that can only be a good thing. I can't comment on where government are going to go on this. What I can say is that conversation is very positive. So, you know, and we would expect some sort of formal notification from government about next steps in the next 6 to 9 months. So yes, I appreciate it's not ideal, but I think it's a necessary step. And unless mediators wanted to work for minimum wage, then I don't see how it could have worked any other way. So whilst we might harumph about it being called mediation, what it does do is bring the word mediation into the public consciousness, and for that, I think we have to welcome it.
There's one caveat I'd say to that, Paul, which is fledgling mediators probably would be prepared to mediate matters at almost nil cost, purely in terms of getting experience. But I do accept that now that there's a system up and running, it would be probably foolish to try and dismantle or change that.
And also, you know, the government needed a quick and reliable way of fixing a problem, and you can't ask government to change the whole system and rely on the goodwill or volunteering of junior mediators. That was never going to fly from government's perspective. So obviously those mediators who are servicing that system are government employees, so they are on a civil service salary, and that has enabled them to sweep up the cost within the wider civil service budget. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm sure you're right, but we were never going to convince government to essentially rely on goodwill of associates.
Thank you very much. I've got Gerard Tomney next on my screen. Hello, Gerard.
Hi, Dave. Paul, just picking up on your question about how to bridge the gap between the portfolio that the CMC does and there's your bit of paper, off you go in the civil and commercial group, which is where I sit. And my other half's a family mediator, and they have PPCs, which I'm sure many of you will know about, the professional practice consultants, which is a sort of mentoring scheme. And they run that on a fee-paying basis, but there's a bit of debate about whether you should or shouldn't charge for it. But I think having, for the fledgling mediators, or in fact for any mediator, a bit like the psychotherapists, where every psychotherapist, no matter how experienced they are, have their own person that they have to go and check in with every month. And this is the recurring theme. The SRA are now looking at family lawyers having mentors to just download to. So the point I'm making is, I think that having a PPC scheme within civil and commercial mediation, whether or not done through CMC, is a really good idea, because you get to, when I was a trainee lawyer, I used to carry bags for people and just listen to them and talk to them in the taxis. Having that and you'll know from your military background, you know, having somebody that can mentor you and guide you and be on hand when you need them is a really good idea. Practically, whether it would work, whether there'd be enough people volunteering to be a PPC, but the FMC do it and it works really well. And they do it in groups as well. It's just about an hour and a half, and you only check in, I think, 4 times a year. And the fees, if there are fees, can be kept quite low. But in my experience, I've been going now for about 3 years, and having people like Dave, like these groups, like many other individual mediators that I work with and meet, and through CMC, for example, I pick up an awful load of stuff about them, and it's really, it's really, really important. So I put it in the CMC questionnaire that went out a few months ago. I mean, is that something that's popped up on your radar, on the committee's radar?
Yeah, absolutely, several times. In fact, it routinely comes back. So as I say, we had a board meeting yesterday, and there was a paper presented on mentoring. I think we will undoubtedly end up with some kind of system similar to what you describe. I think it's very likely to be done in groups, because you know, the scheme that Mandy Lenton is pilot scheme that she's running now, that's done in groups of, I think, 15. I might be wrong. Partly, as I say, from a cost perspective, but also from a learning from each other perspective. And I think, you know, to your point, there's as much value in learning from other mediators as there is from learning from a supposed expert or, you know, experienced mediator. So as I say, if nothing else, you can learn from each other's mistakes. We have surveyed senior mediators. One of the things that comes up quite often is people saying, well, you know, fellows should have to mentor associates. That just doesn't stack up. So it doesn't stack up, because we surveyed the fellows, and they said, a lot of them said, we don't want to do it, we're too busy. You know, very often those are individuals who are at the sort of pinnacle of their career, and you know, earning the money they thought they were going to earn 10 years beforehand. So that's first thing. Second thing is, if you just look at the sheer numbers, you know, we've as I say, a third of our membership now is associates. And I don't think it's fair, again, to expect people to volunteer. It's about professionalizing the profession, and you know, we shouldn't be relying on the goodwill of a few senior mediators to mentor the next generation down, we should be putting in a system that means there's fair and equitable access for everyone. Doesn't matter where you live, you know. So what tended to happen historically was there were mentoring opportunities or observation opportunities for those who lived in London because there were more mediators around. Well, that's no help if you live in Plymouth, and yet, you know, you've done the same course, you paid the same membership. So we have to find ways, innovative ways to bring people together. And as I say, we have this pilot scheme now. There was a paper to the board yesterday. It is alive and well. And as I said, increasingly pressing, not only because of the professional requirement, but also because of the commercial requirement. If, you know, associates are an increasing part of our income, and therefore we've got to look after them commercially, if nothing else, because we can't afford them or to do a couple of years and go, well, actually mediation's not for me, or I can't get ahead, and then leave. So because that's not going to help us to sustain the organization. So yeah, both from a professional development and a commercial perspective, we've got to find a solution here. And you know, the initiatives that we've got running at the minute are going really well. The question is, how do we roll them out more broadly?
You'll get there. It sounds like it's on the radar. Just before I finish, Natasha, do you have a PPC? And if you do, how does that work for you?
I love her. She's amazing. But I'm very aware that she is one superwoman in an industry that's probably got, I mean, let's put it this way, the people that are on my course and qualified this, well, past the same time as me, their PPCs aren't as amazing.
Right.
But in the true essence of it, it's amazing, and she's great. But I do have PPC left.
Because you said you're a commercial, you do some commercial stuff as well. What's your view on having PPCs in the commercial world?
I think it's great, but on the point of pricing, I'm very aware that I'm very lucky, and this industry and switching into this industry, even though I've got family experience, takes a lot of money.
Yeah.
And PPCs in family side, I don't know if I should disclose this, but my PPC charges 160 an hour.
Yeah.
And I think that's the very, very top end. And I know someone else who charges around 50, 75.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors to consider. Yes, the benefit is there, but also is the work there? Are we supporting people enough? Yeah, there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of areas where you can abuse it too.
But in principle, it's a good thing.
It's a good thing, definitely.
We've got to 10 o'clock. We've got 2 hands raised. Paul, have you got time to take a couple of more?
Three. I think Susan's got her hand up. Yes,
right.
I've got about another 10 minutes. So
okay, so if we can keep these relatively short, please. Somebody's just disappeared, so I've now got Vernon Hadida. Is the only one I've got on the screen with a hand up at the moment.
Paul, you mentioned the cost of mediation, more as we would recognise it, is an obstacle for the government and a concern. The government used to produce an annual report on the money actually saved by government through using mediation. Is that report still commissioned?
Do you know what, Vernon? That's a very good question that I don't know the answer to. It's certainly being able to, you know, whenever dealing with government, being able to clearly and objectively lay out the business case is the way forward, and that's something that the sector has always struggled with slightly. You know, we're doing some work, particularly around community, looking at you know, what is the cost saving of utilising mediation. Yeah,
well, I just throw it in as an idea, perhaps to go back to government with us to whether they feel it would be worthwhile commissioning that report again, because it did demonstrate the huge saving to, I think, local government, which you mentioned earlier, and national government through using mediation. One of the things that we are able to do at the minute, given the small claims results from the small claims scheme, is now talk to government about where their pain points are for claims over 10,000, particularly in terms of waiting times.
and start to extrapolate, well, you know, if we achieved a similar result, you know, in these bigger claims, what would that look like? So that work is just starting now. Now, probably everyone in this room would say, actually, if you're going to go full-blown mediation, we should get a better resolution rate than sort of horse trading, which is a little bit how the current system has been. But that it is, as ever, data is useful. And the more as we go on, we've gradually got more and more data, and it becomes increasingly, you know, if I can give you an analogy, 2 years ago the door was open a crack. Now the door is open probably 1.5 feet, and we've got one shoulder in. Do I think we'll get there for claims over 10,000? Yes, I do. That's me talking, not CMC. And I think that's purely because the government hasn't really got anywhere else to go. So actually, you know, as I slightly controversially say, for me, COVID, despite the dreadful impact it had elsewhere, for mediation, it was the best thing ever, because it enabled us, it forced us to evolve in terms of mediating online and training online, and it's forced the government a couple of years down the line to have to change the system in order to cope with the backlog. So from both those perspectives, it was definitely moved us in the right direction.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. We've got time for 2 others then. First, Jeremy Lawrence, and then Sue Bloom. So Jeremy, over to you first, please.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thanks for your exposition on the CMC before. My background is in the Congregational Rabbinate, where as senior rabbis, we did a lot of mentoring pro bono and providing observations to junior rabbis. And I think it's a very helpful system. So while I understand there's a value in professionalizing PMCs, etc., PBCs, I do think that some mentoring should be provided by seniors. The second point really stems from that, though, and that is I'm worried that as we move into mandatory mediation for higher value claims within the court system, that's all going to be gobbled up by the lawyers and people who are coming into mediation from a non-legal background are not going to be able to get the opportunities to mediate in those cases. And I was wondering what the CMC is looking to do to enable professional mediators as mediators to get into that space.
I think the answer to that is control the supply. You know, the question is, how will government decide who is eligible for that work? You know, we would argue that, you know, we want that to be CMC members and probably no one else, and that's slightly controversial. But if we believe in the standards that we're setting and the professional development we're putting in place, then you know, why would we not argue for that? Of course, that's what we're going to argue for, and that goes back to finding work for mediators and promoting mediation. Now, there'll be other organisations that will want their mediators on that list as well, but we're certainly in a strong position given that you know, we're the primary point of consultation with government. And in that scenario, it won't matter whether you're from a legal background or not. Because we don't differentiate within this organisation as to whether or not you've got a legal background. So there would be no advantage necessarily to being from a legal background. You wouldn't get any kind of prioritization in terms of access to that system. You know, the question will be at what level would government be, what level of membership, if you like, will government be willing to open that work? You know, will it be for those who are qualified, you know, associate upwards? Would it only be for registered? We don't know the answer to that yet. What it will do is be a complete game changer in terms of the availability of work and therefore the amount of resource available. And one of the things we're trying to persuade government is to say, okay, you know, you want us to basically do all the donkey work here. Can you provide some resource to help us get that position in place? And that's where we're at the minute, and that's the sort of horse trading that's going on.
Thanks very much.
Right, thank you. And lastly, but not leastly, Sue Bloom, please.
So I'm sorry I didn't put my electronic hand up, but I can't seem to find how to do it, which is pathetic.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Two very quick things. Thanks, Paul. The first is you, Dave, wrote in the chat early on today that you've advocated, I think wisely, publicly, that the CMC website should be searchable by professional background, architect, solicitor, etc. And I very much favour that. So my first quick question to Paul is that on the radar? And the second quick question to you, Dave, is I'm very conscious that there are new people today, and usually the new people that come have a few minutes or a few seconds to introduce themselves. And I think we should allow that to happen today.
On the second point, Sue, yes, we will be doing that. That's our standard format for allowing people to introduce themselves after we've done what I call the formal part of the meeting.
Thanks. And the first point really to Paul.
And Sue, to the first point, mediator search function is the bane of my life. And has been for the last 4 or 5 years. So, and because, yes, we want to provide more clarity in the search, but that is difficult, and it's particularly difficult geographically now that everybody does everything online. You know, so one of the things we're always asked around is well, can we have a geographical search? Well, that's slightly moot in this day and age because you know, it doesn't matter if you're in Plymouth or Portsmouth, you might still do a mediation in Preston. In terms of background, yes, I think it's aspirational. I don't quite know how to say this and be polite. Part of the problem is that when we take mediators marketing, if you like, everybody's an expert in everything, and therefore it's quite difficult for us to, you know, to be able to do the due diligence to check whether people have actually got, you know, a background or qualification in something that sits outside mediation. So that is the difficulty. It's between providing clarity for the customer and providing equality for the mediator. And I don't necessarily have I don't have a magic wand, otherwise I would have waved it about 5 years ago on this.
Just one very quick thing. I know I said it'd be quick because we need to be quick, but if I take myself, for example, as a management consultant, it's very obvious from my CV, I was a management consultant for the Big Five for 25 years. Sure. Similarly, if somebody is a practicing architect, they'll have their architect. So it's about the proof through the previous experience rather than people just saying what they're specialized in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I definitely think it's something that we need to work on. As I say, we're going to do a website refresh this year, and providing more clarity and also, you know, at the minute we have a situation where service providers and individuals are sort of all mixed up in the same list. That's not necessarily very helpful. So we are looking to do that. So long story short, I agree with you. It's work in progress. We're not there yet.
At the risk of embarrassing Paul, when I first raised this in open session, at least 10 years ago, I was told that it would be accommodated in the next revamp of the website. But enough said. Thank you very much, Paul, for your contribution. Lots of people in the chat have said thank you very much, and for all your efforts and the general efforts of the CMC. I know that there are 1 or 2 people who are board members or committee members on at the moment. We thank them for all their efforts because we know that they put an awful lot of effort and time into helping other mediators, and particularly fledgling, as I call them, mediators. So thank you, Paul. Really, really interesting and thoughtful discussions. if we may, we'll invite you in about a year's time again to give an update then.
Yeah, thank you. And if I can draw your attention to 12th of June, which will be our strategy launch, which will be again online, and that will be another opportunity, one, for us to talk about what we're planning, a bit less guarded, if I'm ever guarded, about what we're planning to do going forward, and also probably myself, Victoria, who's our Deputy CEO, and Kelly, our Chair, to answer any questions about, you know, where you think we're going in the future. So yes, 12th of June.
Okay, thanks very much.
Cool. Okay, thanks very much. All the best.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.